Yeah, we've been seeing for days now that Ukrainian losses are pretty massive. I mean, hundreds a day. I saw the other day something like 500 troops lost, and tanks and vehicles, very very high. How much longer can the Ukrainians hold out? Until they fully collapse. The armed forces, that is.
Well, I mean, we get a clue of this. Let's say, the Ukrainians started the conflict with a active duty force of around 260,000 men. They had available reserves around 300,000. They could mobilize and bring in another 600,000. Um, a document that was leaked from the Ministry of Defense shows that by early July, the Ukrainians had suffered 191,000 casualties in the army alone. If you add in border guards, Air Force, et cetera, the number rises to around 250,000.
Wow.
That's an unsustainable loss. And this doesn't include the massive casualties that have accrued since that report was written, which probably number in the area of another 25,000. So, we're approaching 300,000 losses for Ukraine. Not all are dead. Most of these are wounded, but of this, I would say that around 80,000 represent dead, Ukrainian dead. And most of the wounded are wounded to such that they can't return to active duty. These are unsustainable losses. Ukraine cannot sustain these losses. The cream of their fighting force has been killed, wounded, and what's left has to be dispersed amongst untrained soldiers to such an extent that the combat effectiveness of the units that are created through this merger is as close to nil as possible. The Ukrainians right now are able to maintain a semblance of a defense because they are still operating within the fortified region of Donbass. But the Russians are in the process of rolling up the last of these fortifications. And once they break free of these fortifications, the Russians are going to actually enter into a phase of operations that plays to their doctrinal strength. And that is the maneuver warfare of the operational maneuver group or brigade. The Ukrainians may have been able to, fight the Russians on an equal plane early on in the conflict when their military was intact and staffed by professional soldiers. But right now, their military is incapable of engaging in that kind of combined arms maneuver warfare. And this will just, again, further the destruction and the rout of the Ukrainian military. So I think we've reached the culminating point, meaning that the Ukrainians will only get weaker. And the more this war goes on, it's not, that it's not a gradual weakening. All of the factors combine, and eventually you hit this tipping point where it's just a rapid collapse. We saw that with the French army in June of 1940 and the Battle of France, when the Germans, basically caused a very powerful, very well-equipped, well-trained French army to collapse. And I think we're going to see that now with the Ukrainians in the near future.
We saw